beginning, please.
Okay.
So I would like to first introduce myself. My name is Esther Eghobamien Mshelia, and it is an unparalleled honor to be able to moderate this high-powered panel of activists, leaders, women who have seen it and been it, and would actually be telling us both from the policy perspective, from the civil society perspective, from the government perspective, from leadership, and then from actually mobilizing other actors on the field. And so I believe that the wealth of experience that we have on the panel is something that everybody should be able to take away a little new piece on how to tackle the whole issue of insurgency. We've been at it for many years. We never imagined that we, Nigeria, would be one of those who would stay on an issue for almost 8-10 years. And here we are today. So what has brought us here? What have we learned? How should that help us in how we proceed from where we are? And that's going to be the thrust of our conversation today. And on the panel, like I said, is a very, very rich panel. And I'm not going to go in any particular order in speaking about those who are on the panel, because if I try to do that, then I may get into trouble, because there's some people here, I should just doff my hat to them and not really call their name. Permit me to start with my big auntie Iyom, Josephine Anenih. She's here. She has been a former Minister of Women Affairs and Social Development for Nigeria. She's trained as an educationist, as a lawyer. She's a passionate women's rights activist, and she does make things happen in terms of getting policies and systems to change. She is a results-oriented, dedicated leader, and she currently runs her own organization, which she founded, the Alzheimer's Disease Foundation. She's also the co-founding president of Women Foundation for Nigeria. So I welcome you, Auntie Iyom. I've been trying to catch you for the past 3 weeks, I think, and I'm happy that we're able to catch up on Zoom. So welcome, Auntie Iyom, Anenih. I would also like to introduce Ene Ede. I think Ene is on board. You are here. If you are, just wave so that we can know that you're here. I saw you somewhere on the list. She's a trained economist, and I've had the privilege to work with her, not only as an economist, but also as a journalist. She is a teacher. She is a development worker. She's versatile in community work and in behavioral change communication. And so she's put all of that into her work in human rights. And she's also been able to contribute to gender strategizing, both in Nigeria and across some of the partners in other countries. She's an advocate for safety nets for rural dwellers, and Ene has a conviction that it's possible for all Nigerians, and I can say indeed all citizens, to enjoy the good things of life. She's worked with the Woman Today newspaper, which she published herself, producing Women Parliament, Gender Dialogue, and Gender in the Balance social service as an electronic media program. Mrs. Ene, you are welcome to this particular panel, and I hope that we can learn a little bit more from you. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of our sister, Mrs. Aisha Muhammed-Oyebode. I know you came in and said, oh, this is like reunion. We've never met one-on-one, but I've seen your footprints in the sand, and I know the work that you have done, not only as the CEO of the Murtala Muhammad Foundation, helping to drive reconstruction in the northeast of Nigeria, but I know all of the work that you put in for the Bring Back Our Girls. And I know that you're on the board of the Harvard Kennedy School's Women's Leadership Board and the Women and Public Policy Program. And I hope after this, we can get together and talk about women in public policy, because that's something that I've done for many, many years. Thank you for all the work that you've done for the Bring Back Our Girls. And I hope that that will shape and influence some of the discussions that we will have this evening, Nigerian time, and this afternoon, the UK time. I would also like to acknowledge the presence here of Big Auntie, Mrs. Yemisi Ransome Kuti, who comes from the famous Ransome Kuti family. And I know you're schooled, your education is both local and international. And I hope that all of that will come through in the conversations today. Founder, I know that you're the founder and executive director of the Nigerian Network of NGOs. And also you were the senatorial candidate for Lagos Central District in 2011. I hope you've not thrown your hat back on the back seat, that you're still ready to go and you keep nurturing young people to step out and put themselves up for leadership. Thank you very much. And I know that your work with different boards and institutions will come through in the experience sharing today. My own sister, my friend, we go back a long way. Dr. Amina Salihu, I know you've worn both the civil society hat, the government hat, the funder hat, the donor hat. And so as we dialogue today, we should see a lot of that. I know that you were a lecturer in political science at the Ahmadu Bello University. So maybe some of those lecturing bits will come through here. You're a writer, you are a technical advisor to governments and to institutions. And I know that you're currently with the MacArthur Foundation Africa office. So Dr. Amina Salihu, I welcome you to the panel and all the panelists, and I thank the organizers. And I'll just take a few minutes to kind of put us through the flow, how we intend that this panel should go, so that panelists know what we intend to achieve. We will have like 8 minutes each for each panelist. I'll yield the floor to you as the panelist. You'll have 8 minutes to briefly just give us your experience on insurgency, particularly in Nigeria, what the trends have been. How did it affect your work? What have you seen? And what lessons can you share with the audience in terms of the evolution, the dynamics of insurgency? And after that, after the 8 minutes, which I greatly and graciously urge that we try to stick to so that we can get the best out of all of the panelists. After 8 minutes, I think then we will pull out some questions. I have a couple questions which I think should be burning questions representing the thoughts of the audience. And so I will put a few questions to each panelist. And after those questions, you get like 3 minutes to respond to those questions, pointed questions that would help us draw out conclusions in terms of recommendations. What is good? What should we be doing differently? How should we better uphold a lot of the conventions, declarations? Peace and security in the UN, the Security Council is top priority. But what are we not getting right? And what can we do differently? And how can we change the architecture or our response mechanism? Those are things that I believe if we focus on, we might be able to do things differently. And of course, at the end of that, I know that we've got a lot of participants signed in from different parts of the world. We would also like to interact with them. And so I hope that our organizers in the chat box are checking out, those who are making questions, presenting questions, so that we can give them the opportunity to channel some questions directly to some of the panelists. We'll give like 15 minutes to that. And at the end of that, we will give the panelists like 2 minutes to respond to some of those questions that they feel is linked with their area of work, and wrap up and leave their 1 or 2 suggestions in terms of where to go. And so without any particular order to how we are going to be calling on the panelists, I would like at this minute to yield the floor to Mrs. Yemisi Ransome Kuti. I welcome you again to the panel, and I would ask that you please keep to the 8 minutes limit and share your experiences with us in terms of insurgency and what your views, your thoughts, your perspectives are. Thank you very much, Mrs. Ransome Kuti.
Thank you very much, Esther. Thank you for introducing me. I am actually Miss Yemisi Ransome Kuti. I am the head of the Ransome Kuti family, not one of Fela's 28 wives. And it's my pleasure to be amongst fellow activists and those who have obviously spent a lot of time and passion on dealing with insecurity and development generally. My experience has been mixed in the sense that because I live in Lagos, the spate of herder attacks and stuff like that hasn't really impacted a state like Lagos. So a lot of my understanding is based on the reports that we get from various quarters. But more importantly, I had the privilege of doing a tour of the Southwest in June earlier this year, where with the Savannah Center, the Nigerian network of NGOs put myself and Dr. Patrick Ogoyi on this very, very rigorous tour of all the states in the Southwest. And we had focus group meetings with those who have been kidnapped, the traditional leaders, the political elite, and citizens generally. And it was very informative to find that the different experiences engendered different points of addressing the challenge. Of course, there were people whose idea was that, well, look, let's just split the country, let everybody go their own way. But I think what the predominant sentiment was that the underlying causes of insurgencies will persist whether you split up or you stay together. And by and large, of course, we know women are the first line of the fallback, the fact that they have to look after their families if the men are killed, and they actually bear the brunt of a lot of the conflict that we have been having across the country, and of course the children. But the underlying sentiment was that if we do not address the economic issues, there's no way we're going to be able to deal with insurgency. And part of the economic challenge is a political formula that we currently practice in the country. The fact that women are not included in a lot of the hierarchical, political, economic, and social institutions that we have.
Auntie Yemisi, maybe if you go off video, it might be more stable.
Hello, are you still there? Auntie Yemisi, are you there? Perhaps you should take off your video.
The challenge that we will continue to have.
Maybe you should just be on audio so that you can be stable.
You are muted now.
I am the result of the Oni of Ife at Ile-Ife. And even the Oni of Ife cannot provide power for the people staying at his resort. And like I've said, the focus, why I'm here is because there's a huge program being organized by the United States and Ascend Studios and people like Joke Silva and other prominent people to empower women. If you do not empower women and give them economic wherewithal to look after themselves, to look after their families, then insurgency will continue. If you do not address educational deprivation, it's actually a wasteland in terms of the quality of and the quantity of education that we have as policy and strategies in our country. And working at national, state, and local levels My experience has taught me that a lot of what we do, we go on this kind of webinars all the time. And the last time I went to the IMF, I said, I'm not coming back until I see actual policies being implemented in my street, in my local government, in my community. I was part of the Vision 2020 policy initiative. We have the documents to say, this is where we want to go, this is how we want to do it, but there's very little to show for the impact on citizens at ground zero. And a lot of the work I do now is working at the local government level with young people. We're working in partnership with state government, because I think that's their job. It's the job of government to deliver on these things. So I believe a partnership with civil society and private sector, people like chambers of commerce and other institutions, private sector institutions, must come together to deliver purpose-built vehicles that apply to specific areas. It's not going to be a general thing. And a lot of the things that the federal government is doing is not being practiced by the states. The states themselves are not looking at what are the specific challenges, the specific comparative advantages that can be delivered from the local government up. A couple of weeks ago, we had a summit, a local government summit, the first in Nigeria, where we're able to bring the young people,
I'm going to ask that you probably together. Round up. Auntie Yemisi, I'm going to ask that like in 30 seconds, you round up, because I'm going to come back to you. And I've heard a few things that you've said that really speak to the issues of the driving forces and the fundamental causes. You've mentioned like 2 or 3 of them, which have been attested to by studies. So in 30 seconds, because you said a few things about what could be done differently, can you wrap that up in 30 seconds?
Absolutely. The challenges are many. The solutions are political, inclusion, and the ability of political parties themselves who actually drive the policy and implementation of all of these things live up to those strategies, those various things that we've signed up to at the various international conferences. At the local level, we must begin to have that interconnection between policy, between private, between government, between the citizens, and we must ensure that we focus on our young people, because therein lies the challenge. If we do not get it right with the young people today, our problems will multiply. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very, very much. That was very, coherent, to the point. And I think you've hit a few nails on the head that speak to the root causes and what we should be doing differently in terms of dealing, with insurgency by addressing not just the phenomenon, not just the manifestations, but to go to the roots and then to be more strategic, look into the future and the next generation. Thank you very, very much, Auntie Yemisi. And I will now turn immediately to Auntie Iyom, because I think hearing Miss Auntie Yemisi, hearing, her passion, her experiences, she's targeted. Auntie Iyom, you've been there, you've sat on the chair, you've had the privilege to take party policies and try to transform them into reality in the lives of citizens, particularly women. I know that you champion women's economic empowerment, their leadership. So, Auntie Iyom, I would like to yield the floor to you and say, like in 8 minutes, drawing on your vast experience, you were there, when all of these insurgencies started. What would you tell us? What can you tell the young people? What can you tell the world are the lessons learned? Where are the cracks that we really need to be speaking to, cementing, so that we can make more progress? Auntie Iyom, you have the floor. Are you still with us, Auntie Iyom?
All right, sorry, I think I was muted. Thank you very much,
Okay.
Esther, and thank you very much, Prof, for inviting me to this panel. When Prof invited me, I was thinking, what will I be speaking, what will I be saying on a panel of professors and academicians and everybody? And I said, well, I'm a woman. I saw at the end of it where they said the perspectives of women, how does it impact on women? I said that I'm a woman, and not only that I'm a woman, I can now claim that I'm a grassroots woman because I'm living in the village. And so I'm feeling and seeing the effects of insurgency on not only women, but on everybody. The first time I really paid attention to that word, insurgency, was in 2009, when I was at the National Institute for Strategic Studies, Kuru, and it was being discussed. And all the generals, all the military people who are on the course at that time were saying, you see, insurgency, you don't use force to stop insurgency. How would you stop it? Was what we were discussing at that time. And from that time till now, all the suggestions of dialogue, we should dialogue with the people and convince them and let them to stop, being rebellious and all that. I find that it is all textbook matter. We need to go back to what is the cause? What made them, become rebellious? I'll take the Southeast, for instance. Inequity, perceived injustice, and all that brought about again the agitation for Biafra. And the people who are agitating for this Biafra, don't have any power, honestly. They are unemployed, they are poor, and they don't fear death. So they can do anything. And that is why we found the IPOB and what they were doing. Along the line, criminals hijacked it or infiltrated the agitation. And now nobody can go out in the Southeast. Nobody can go anywhere, can't travel around. Nobody can talk, because if you want to talk, if you talk, they will say you are IPOB. Then IPOB will say you are government. So right, you're wrong. On the left, you are wrong. So you find that everybody is like gagged. Nobody is saying anything and nobody can do anything. You go to the Northeast. Why did Boko Haram get so strong? What was done? Why didn't they do that, talking to them at that initial stage when it was starting? And then it got to the stage where so many people were radicalized and voluntarily joined the Boko Haram. And when I say many people, I'm talking about children, I'm talking about men and women. So we most times when we talk about war, insurgency, banditry and everything, we make it look as if it's only women that are the bronze bearers. No, they are not. Sometimes the women are also principal actors. In the Southeast here, a lot of the kidnapping, a lot of the armed robbery that is taking place, I have heard that their leaders were women, young girls, young ladies leading the bandits, the armed robbers or the kidnappers in their operations. When they were fighting the police and killing the security forces here, a lot of them also were women. So you see, it is not only men, but I know that as women and as mothers, we suffer in all fronts. It's either it is our husbands or our brothers or our sons that are killed, or our daughters that are abducted and raped, or ourselves as mothers, even old women are abducted, kidnapped, raped, and abused in several other ways. So we suffer from all fronts. What is the answer? I know that the researchers, the academicians, you have researched, you know that this is a global issue, global phenomenon. But how we just can't just be talking about it. How can we solve it is the question that we should be talking about. How is it affecting us? When it was raging in the Northeast, the people in the Southwest and South and Southeast thought it was a Northeast affair, that it didn't concern them. But when farmers could no longer farm and the food was not coming down from the North because they were major suppliers of our food item and prices went up, we started feeling the impact. Same thing down here. When IPOB says no going out every Monday, and everybody is sitting at home.
Yes,
Pardon?
Auntie Iyom, I'm sorry that I have to barge in. You've really painted the scenario and used the Southeast as a case study for us, and shown that women are also not only victims of insurgency, but because of the driving causes, because of the issues of unemployment, the issues of exclusion, the issues of non-participation, the issues of mismanagement of resources and non-accountability. People feel they are helpless. And because their backs are technically to the wall, women have joined in. I'm sure you've asked a question, and I'm going to ask that we hold that question, Auntie, because that's the question all of us are asking, that knowing that these are the driving forces, what can we do differently? I know that right now with your networks, you still have the ears. I know you're not in the party in power, but you still have the ears of the right people. And I'm sure that some of the things that we speak here, it may resonate with things happening in other parts of the world, but what can we do differently that will not only solve the IPOB issue in the Southeast, but will help with the Boko Haram, will help with NSAS, with the youth who have already taken a firm stand in terms of resisting the kind of governance system that we have. So I'm going to ask that I come back to you, Auntie Iyom, as you listen to everybody, just listen to what is it that we're not saying and what is it that people need to hear, because you know the language for your colleagues. You know what the political parties are struggling with. And so I'm hoping that when we come back, you're going to tell us a little bit of that. How can the political parties respond, to the real needs of the people? Because that has come up from you. It has also come up from Auntie Yemisi, that the policies are not resonating or are not reflecting or speaking to the reality of the citizens of all categories. And so we put that on hold, Auntie, and then I turn the floor now to, I'm going to ask that Miss Aisha, Mrs. Oyebode, you are still on the Harvard board. You also listen to a lot of scholars. I have read a lot of research, and a lot of the findings of the driving causes are the things that we're hearing. We're hearing, cultural practices, high illiteracy, a mismatch between the political interest of the elites and the citizens. These are tested driving causes, root causes of insurgency. But from where you operate, both as an academician and a practitioner, Auntie Yemisi, Miss Aisha, can you please, in the next couple minutes, reflect, draw on your experiences. What is it that is missing in Nigeria? We've heard a few things, and I'm sure you're listening. What is it in the root causes? What is it in our response system? Because I think we know, I've heard that our political economy, you know, the way it is managed, the way it is structured, the disconnect between the federal, the states and the local level. But what is it? What other issues do you think we should be speaking to from your own wealth of experience, both as a scholar and as a woman leader? So I yield the floor to you and give you probably like 8 minutes for you to draw on your experiences on what we need to learn or what we need to respond to.
Okay, I'm muted. Good evening, everyone.
Mrs. Oyebode, yeah.
Yes, good evening.
Thank you.
And thank you for that. Thank you for my aunties that have gone ahead. I'm so excited to be able to speak after you and, you know, draw on some of the things that you've talked about. You know, as I was looking at the questions on the panel, I wanted to talk about everything, but I thought, okay, let me just narrow it down to a few things that are really important. And I always like a bit of storytelling. So I'm going to take us back a little bit to, if anybody remembers when the first Chibok girl was returned, that's Amina Ali Nkeki. This was in, I believe in 2015 now, actually, all my, what's it called? Timelines are a bit mixed up. But one of the things that I thought was particularly instructive was that when she came back with a child, and quote and in quotes, she came back with a husband. And yes, I know that a lot of the members of the Pink Baka girls were very offended when people referred to the man with her as her husband. But in reality, there are also many people who felt comforted by the fact that he had married her. And I think that that is one of the challenges that we are seeing with this insurgency. And I really want to say this very carefully and delicately, but what we're seeing with this insurgency is that it's mirroring a lot of practices. And I think those were the two issues that were mentioned by both earlier speakers, both my aunties, which is that there's a lot that we're seeing with the insurgency that is being mirrored, is a reflection of what we see normally within our societies. So the first one is the question of forced marriage. You know, we've talked about rape because, you know, behind this cloud of, oh, he married her, so it's okay. They've married them, so they're okay. The 102 Chibok girls that are still there, they've been married, so it's okay. No, it's not okay. In the case of forced marriage, what you have is you have rape, you have other elements of sexual violence, you have tied to it some kind of servitude, because she's now the man's wife, so she has to do everything else other than be his sexual slave. And more importantly, you've put her in a package that she cannot extricate herself from, because as far as she understands, it's okay with society that she's married. So I started thinking about it and I thought, well, is it really that different from what we see? That same month that the Chibok girls were abducted, there's a young girl in Kano who was arraigned before a court because she had killed her husband and 3 of his friends. He married her when she was 12 years old. Her name is Wasila. And she had no clue. And I think part of it also, so as I'm talking, I may digress a little bit. We are putting children out there, young girls, who have no Western education, no Islamic education, no exposure, nothing. This girl had absolutely no knowledge. So when she was describing sex with her husband in Hausa, she said he was doing all kinds of rubbish with me because she had no clue. I mean, I understand that, you know, the fact that you are aware does not make it different, but at least maybe if there's a little bit of understanding, you know, then they will know what they are fighting against. And Wasila was arraigned. a lot of the lawyers came together in Kano and they tried to see how they could get the courts to declare nolo prosequi and then for her to be released. And they refused, and they said she had chosen from many suitors. So clearly, you know, she knew what she was doing. This girl was 12 years old. When the frustration, and I think when her body just couldn't cope with all of the physical abuse, the older wife had made food for the husband. She put rat poison in it, and all the husband and 3 of his friends died. And they insisted that she was going to be tried and that the capital punishments would be imposed. Eventually, the lawyers managed to get her off, and she was able to, she had to be sent away from home. Why am I going in this long journey? Is because I believe that the greatest challenge we have is that everything we see in an insurgency, everything we see in war, everything we see in conflict is usually a mirror of the things that already are existing within our society. So what am I talking about? Do we know? Nobody here can tell me what the age of consent is for a girl in Nigeria. We don't know. It's all up in a state of flux. There's so many different laws. It's so bad in some situations that a girl as young as 7 is thought if she has reached puberty, she is mature enough to have consent. So we need to look at our constitution. What does our constitution say about the age of consent? What does the Child's Right Act say about the age of consent? What are we doing to bring all of that together under one umbrella? So that's one issue that has to do with the Chibok girls. Another issue, and again, is tied to our response within the society, even in peacetime. Does anybody know that Boko Haram has used the most number of women and girls as suicide bombers in the entire history of the world? Now, if you're familiar with the Tamil Tigers of Sri Lanka, in 10 years, the Tamil Tigers, and they were quite bad, used about maybe between 40 and 50 women as suicide bombers. In 7 years, Boko Haram has used over 400 women and girls as suicide bombers. So my question then is, how is it possible we have a society, these girls are being stolen from within us, bombs are strapped to them, some as young as 7 years of age, and there is no recourse, there is no, in fact, I would imagine that the world ought to stop. You know, and it takes us back to when these people come and they take women and they take girls and they bring them back, what do? We take the women, we take the children, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, but what then happens after that? These are, so I may not have answers, but I'm just throwing up a lot of questions around what are the things that we really need to be thinking and talking about. How is it that Boko Haram is able to access? You know, there's a theory. Yesterday, someone asked me, she said, so what does it mean to us that Shekau is dead, Mama Nur is dead, and sorry, the third, oh, I'm past 8 minutes. Oh, I didn't realize.
Yes, Mrs. Oyebode. You know, I think you've thrown up so many new dimensions and the fact that we've got a constitution, but I've also seen in the chat, somebody is asking, do we have a constitution that is commonly owned, that we all ascribe to that constitution, and how justiciable are the laws that we have? We have the Child Rights Act, but really, how many cases have gone to court to uphold the rights that are guaranteed or enshrined by that act and have been upheld? And in the light of that, you know, how do we integrate such concerns into our response mechanism? Because it's one thing, and I think for Nigeria, that's an issue that is really contentious for us, is that we seem to have the legal architecture, but it's just on paper. And I beg to say, I've had to deal with other countries to say, and I've heard people, citizens of other countries say, it's paper law or a paper policy. To what extent are the citizens enjoying them? And we are able to actually uphold the values enshrined in that in our day-to-day life, in our interactions, in our policies, in our legislation, in our service delivery. If we're not doing that, something is wrong. And I think that's what you've pointed at, that I can, and I can see Professor Okome, no, decapitating the leaders will leave us also with dealing with a lot of widows and a lot of children who become fatherless. And so we've got to have a more holistic approach. It may be a longer route. And so I want to thank you for throwing up those perspectives. They are valuable. We cannot ignore them because they also contribute to driving our response system. And so I'm going to turn now to my own dear sister, Dr. Amina Salihu, because I know that you have also moved from, one platform or one position to the other. You've been a civil society activist, you have been a policymaker, and you and now you've been a scholar, you've been a lecturer. I mean, Dr. Salihu, can you, share your own experiences? How did we come this far? That we're now, talking about having laws, having a constitution that we cannot uphold, or that we have responses that people are now crying, to have the leaders decapitated. In 8 minutes, Dr. Amina Salihu, share with us some of your rich experiences in terms of insurgency in particular, because insurgency has led now and given birth to heightened banditry and kidnapping. But the whole notion of insurgency, why are people restive? Why would they refuse, to adhere to the rule of the law or constituted authority? And what should we be doing about it differently?
Thank you, my sister, and those joining us for this webinar. Let me turn off my video to improve my audio. And I would like to begin by posing a couple of questions because, from the perspective of critical thought, we should always not assume that what is common is always given. And I begin by agreeing with my sisters that really insurgency is a political economy dilemma. It is not religious and it is not cultural. But I ask, is there a context under which insurgency might be justified? Is there a point where sometimes the state as constituted, as that legal authority, might be the aggressor against the citizens it is meant to protect? And from what I'm hearing on the ground, whether it's insurgency, banditry, kidnapping, ethnic clashes, really, these are distinctions of academics. Citizens measure their experience of this phenomena by their effects. They are defined by loss of life, of limb, of livelihood. It's either you're dead, you're desperate, or your dignity is diminished in the final analysis. And we know the number of lives that have been lost. Let me talk about just the displaced alone. In the Lake Chad Basin, over 3 million people are estimated to be displaced because of all of these different forms of unrest, so to say. So in framing insurgency, therefore, we must ask ourselves the question, because I know there's going to be some documentation coming out of this. Why do some communities cooperate with those that we label as insurgent? Take the Southeast, for example, when Masop says, nobody comes out today, nobody comes out. It's true that some people are co-opted, but then some people offer themselves and they are labeled as insurgents. And those underlying causes have been shared today. I would just like to add a few more to those drivers as well as the enablers of insurgency. A very big thing for me is in terms of the citizen-state disconnect or discontent. And I think sisters have said a lot about this. I will not go in that direction. But impunity actually fuels citizen resistance and citizens taking up arms. When you feel a sense of injustice and it is materializing in terms of poverty, debilitating material poverty, the Northeast and the Northwest are the poorest parts of this country. When in the midst of poverty, you see grand corruption, people stealing billions and getting away with it, and you can't even get money to get fertilizer to be the farmer that you are. The proliferation of small arms and weapons, especially in the West Africa sub-region, is also a driver of insurgency, because it's very easy to get arms. Someone told me a few days ago that you could buy an AK-47 for 5,000 naira. It is that easy. Now, poor intelligence sharing amongst even our own neighbors, because look at our neighbors to the north. You see Niger, you see Chad, they're French speaking, and Nigerians have always been very arrogant around even learning the French language. We think everyone should speak English. So, in terms of even sharing intelligence, it's a very problematic issue. So, to summarize what I've said so far, the character of the Nigerian state itself is problematic. It is rentier in nature. It elevates people seeking rent and punishes industry. A young person wants to aspire, create a small and medium enterprise. They cannot get the loan they need. If they get the loan, the conditions are terrible. They cannot get the economic support they need when they ought to have it. They do not have the infrastructure to actually raise their industry and elevate their condition of living. So there's a lot of anger and exclusion, which happens. I've heard inequity mentioned, but I think exclusion is also what happens, because people then remove themselves because they feel that the state does not work for them. Yes, there are pockets of government services that work here and there, pockets, but they're not adequate. Sometimes we have police that is responsive. Most times our police is underfunded and undertrained. And our response to social issues are sometimes militaristic. How did Boko Haram start? It was the leader of the movement, Mohammed, who was killed extrajudiciously. That was the beginning of Boko Haram. And now it's gone to terrible dimensions. And politicians have even exploited this cannon fodder, so to say, the majority or the myriad of unemployed young people in the north into neighboring countries of Nigeria to also achieve their own aim of capturing power at all cost. So the nature of the Nigerian state itself is very, very problematic. And we always have a law and order approach to a social insecurity problem. We are underfunding social welfare and social investment. The one social investment policy that I can say that works well in this country right now is the homegrown school feeding program, where our children get to eat a meal in school a day, and it has very good import for not just the learning outcomes, but also their health and their well-being. But there's a gender dimension to that particular social investment. It is the fact that the federal government and the state government, they're actually the largest employers of women in this country right now, because over 300,000 cooks under this system are actually women. 97% of the cooks, 97% of the aggregators are women. So for once, there is some kind of attitude that is positive towards ensuring that, socio-economic and political economy matters are centered in policy. But then there's always policy somersault. There is no guarantee that something that is promised by the state will endure. So one way, therefore, to begin to tackle this is to ensure that we have policy consistency. Is also to think seriously about the role of our young people and how to seek power. I mean, once upon a time in this country, we had a political party that had a 60-year-old as a youth leader. So when are we going to seek power? There's a lot of discontent, and state policy is disconnected from building citizen contentment. And everything is local, as you know. Politics is local, life is lived locally. So once people are discontented at the local level, it is bound to rise, to the surface. And it's going to give rise to all kinds of gender-based violence, including sexual and gender-based violence. So 2 or 3 things that I would like to ask us to center on that I probably haven't heard my sisters talk to, I don't want to repeat some of the things that have been said, is that we need to strengthen our advocacy effort based on data and evidence. The National Bureau for Statistics needs to know that data is incomplete if we do not see it disaggregated by sex, by geography, by disability, by generation. We do not have data that can be used to plan. We do not have data that can be used to elevate social investment. Because when we elevate social investment, we can anticipate discontent, whether it's banditry or insurgency or kidnapping or ethnic unrest, because the political economic question will be largely sorted. Second is we need to rethink the issue of girls, of women's empowerment from a life cycle perspective. And the point has been made in different ways today. I'll give an example. Because of the problems of insurgency, girls' education has suffered a setback. Before 2000, I think about 2000, 2005, we're told that only 1 out of 4 girls will finish a course of secondary schooling in northern Nigeria, maybe 2 out of 4 in other parts of Nigeria. But now with insurgency, that figure has become worse. So we cannot think about the usual education of boarding schools where girls have to go very far and they're vulnerable to rape. We have to rethink day schools in ways that parents can feel confidence in the educational system. We need to think about vocational learning that can change their life outcome as well.
Hello, my sister. You are a brilliant scholar. And I know if we gave you 1 hour, you would give us a lecture. You said 3 things and you've given us 2. Need to strengthen advocacy with data and evidence. We need to rethink women's empowerment. What's the 3rd one? Just quickly in 20 seconds.
Yes, my sister, I had 1 more minute. I was timing myself actually. I was supposed to end at 16:57. So you've taken my 20 seconds, moderator, so permit me to take 40 seconds therefore. The 3rd thing that I want to talk about is that we must decentralize infrastructure. A lot of the time, we talk about the federalism not working for us in Nigeria, but that is not the problem. Whether it's federal or unitary, the fact is that where lives are most lived, people want to feel that there's service going to them. You cannot have federal government addressing power. They cannot be addressing water and roads. State governments and local governments have to be very strong and on the mark. The final thing I'd like to say about infrastructure is that it's important that we pay attention to politics. If we think politics is dirty, those who are even dirtier than we think will continue to rule us. We must make way for participation in politics as a fundamental human rights and duty that we need to fulfill. Because if we don't pay attention to accountability and use of resources, we're never going to get the resources that are ours. We would always be asking and we would never get, and accountability will continue to elude us. So the kind of people we put in power actually matters. I thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amina. Maybe we're using different watches, but the good thing is we got an extra point from you. You said 3, but you gave us 4. And I think some of the things that you've spoken to are things that we were beginning to hear from others, but you raised a particular dimension, which was the need for us to pay attention to politics, not only for the sake of holding people accountable, but because we need to determine the kind of people who get into politics. But I think a question that underpins that is what has been consistent, is that how is our political space structured? And what are the parameters for going into politics? How has our constitution defined it? Because with those challenges, then we need to also unpack that layer, because unless we address that constitutional framework and the guidelines, then getting more people on board and addressing the issues that we raised are things that we will still struggle with. But I thank you very much for highlighting them and bringing to the fore the issue of infrastructure, because indeed, goods, services, facilities are really out of the reach. They're not there to serve the people. And I thank you for flagging that. I'm not a panelist. I'm not going to be making a presentation. I'm just ensuring that there's coherence and we get the value that we need. And so I'm going to turn now to Ms. Ene Ede. You are an economist, you are a journalist, and so you've been on the beat for a long time. You've heard all the issues. What is it that is yet unspoken? Particularly, you know, the unspoken realities of the people that we need to address if we're to really, really deal with insurgency from your own experience. You have the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let me first of all align myself with many of the points that have been made already. Because of the network in the house here, because I've left the office, I will not be using the video until the end, towards the end of the intervention. I like all the conversation that is going on, but let me just just add to Madi to say, okay, we've had a lot of grammar around insurgency, banditry, and kidnapping. Let us reduce it to action. And reducing it to action, I would like to reinforce some of the points that our sister Aisha made. One, if you look at on our platform, that is a feminist platform, which is the biggest women's platform in Nigeria, if not Africa. I've worked over time how women engage. And I'm convinced, if you notice that many of the women on those platforms, they don't want to speak any longer. Brilliant women, they don't want to speak because they feel that women are not addressing the issues that are eating us up as a nation. That we are becoming provincial, we are becoming, we are flying ethnic agendas, political agenda, and the rest of it. That has never helped us. Let me give an example. We had agreed that every Tuesday we should appear in complete black from head to toe. It is only Professor Moji Okome that has been consistent. Even many of us who are at the forefront of agreeing that that should happen, it has never happened. That should have been symbolic enough for us to show our displeasure as women. I recall when Mrs. Anenih, Iyom, I have a lot of respect for you. We have a lot of respect for you. When you were Minister of Women Affairs, you never bothered about your political party. I know how much you suffered as a result of bringing every woman around together. So that has been missed from our response to the serious issue of insurgency. Let me go back to what can we do? What are the issues? The point has been made a little bit already that, look, the public trust on government and security agencies is winning in the face of absence of a clear agenda to effectively deal with the insecurity, including even with women in terms of responding to hold structures accountable. Then the state of insecurity in the country has taken a regional, political, religious, and ethnic dimension. If you look at what is happening in the Middle Belt particularly, you agree with me. I'd like us to look at the analysis 2 days ago, that is 48 hours ago, by the channel's analyst. He looked at banditry, insurgency, and kidnapping. He did the analysis. If you look at the regional statistics that came out, you will know that you agree with this second point I have made. It is not enough to deal with insecurity internally. There is also a transnational dimension that must be tackled. I also know that the absence of governance at the local government level, which has been attested to earlier, makes it right for people to be recruited easily into violent extremist or criminal groups. And mostly it's the political class. You know, somebody has mentioned earlier that what is the nexus between more women in government and in governance and leadership and reduction in criminality? Certainly there is. If you look at the attitude, the body language, the spoken language of the political class, you know that they are part of the conspirators. Then we also know that as an economist and a journalist, I've seen that there's a political economy of criminality that is yet to be well explained and understood, which continues to sustain insecurity as evident in the kidnapping for ransom. Then the question you ask is that, what can we do? I've listed some recommendations. We must build trust, and who are the ones to build trust is we women. We don't need to take sides with the very people who are making life unbearable for us. So we must, as women, take the lead in building trust. A number of us are gifted, like the way Aisha spoke. She spoke so dispassionately, never taking sides with anybody and not calling any region or any state names and taking sides. So we must build trust, which is key to engendering citizens' trust in government and the security agencies. This makes it easier for information to flow from community to government, because now it's just top down and the conversation is not going up. Then who are the ones to be able to make the difference? It is women. National orientation alone cannot do it. The local informants will not be available for criminals to use. So as leadership that is committed to management of diversity is needed, we need that. Exclusion is not good for our country. Nigerians must also be able to see whoever that leads them as a leader for all, as a basis for building national cohesion. Then we need close collaboration between Nigerian government and neighboring countries such as Niger, Cameroon, Chad, which in key terms of intelligence gathering and sharing and joint patrol across national borders. I was looking at, if you look at my response to somebody who asked that, what is the nexus between insurgency, reduction in insurgency and women in key positions? And I say, imagine that a woman is in charge. A woman is a national security advisor. A woman is a minister of defense, even minister of state for defense, and holding key agencies that deal with these issues. You will know that the way the woman will respond will be different. The way she wants to use the VAP Act to deal with this issue. If the VAP Act has been given to us as the most progressive law to deal with it, deal with all forms of violence, and we are suffering violence, including state actors. The 24th of the law, of the VAP law is violence by state actors. So we are suffering violence through the action or inaction of state actors. So we should hold them accountable. Then I also think that there is a need to strengthen governance at local level through the delivery of social services and creation of jobs. Imagine a woman is in charge of labor and employment. You will know that the difference will be clear. There will be nothing like bringing in sentiment. And as a way of addressing the challenge of poverty, extreme lack, then I also say, look, investment in empirical research to understand the involvement of money in insurgency through the payment of ransom. Where does the money go? Who collects the money? And where will it end? Women have the special giftings to be able to do this. Like our sister, Professor Okome, every Tuesday we will wear black. Let us agree. If several years ago, the women of the Ikotabasi, just 49 of them 50 of them came out and rattled the most dreaded colonialists. Why shouldn't we be able to do? Why should we bring in sentiment? As women, it doesn't pay us to play up any kind of sentiment. Our situations are the same. So we should play up this issue of the 111 seats and ensure that we have the voice, we have the number. You don't need so much money to be able to speak like we are speaking. And how much money they did cost us? Just few naira. So I look forward to us rising as women and taking back our country. It is possible. It is very possible. Prosperity for all. We can make this happen. Set aside sentiments and let us think of women as women who can rescue this country. It is possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much. Just dead on time. You're actually like 20 seconds short of your time, which is really, really, really commendable. And I thank you, Ene, because you've also highlighted a few new dimensions that we should be paying more attention to. Facilitation of information flow, not only top down, but also from down up. Information sharing, because people really misinformation, fake news, use of technology to circulate disinformation. All of those are issues that actually are contributing to insurgency. And I saw the comment that diversity is not properly managed in Nigeria. Diversity is supposed to be a strength. We say we are united in our diversity, but are we truly united? What are we learning from the insurgency? And of course, the issue about the nexus between more women in leadership and reduction in criminality is not only reduction in criminality, but also in people-centered development and public leadership, because that's something that COVID-19 has shown us around the world. The response mechanism of women is different, their approach is different, they follow data, they follow science, and they're more amenable, you know, to addressing the issues that matter to the people. And I also heard snippets from you about class, and that also came from Amina, from Dr. Salihu. You know, what are class issues? Because we're not speaking so much to class issues, but it appears that inherent in our insecurity now, we are beginning to see that it's being sustained by a class of people. Who are those who are financing and fueling? Because if insurgency has come to stay for so long, should we not be paying attention to that? And somebody suggested that we should engage more in politics. But the politics as defined now, is it going to solve our problem? So I'm not making a presentation. I'm only trying to capture the threads of thoughts that came, that were shared by the panelists. And so I want to thank you for sharing the experiences, but we're going to dedicate a little time now to targeted questions. I know questions have been coming and more will keep coming, you know, from the audience. And I want to encourage participants, if you have questions, to please put them in the chat box. I have not been following the chat box, but I will now, because I know that a lot of Yeah, a lot of questions have been burning and people want to ask, but I think we should lead. I mean, I would like to lead by having some targeted questions at each of the panelists. The first is, we've listened so well to the impacts of conflict, knowing that it's globally acknowledged. I really want to put this to the panelists. And I'm going to move again, going back, starting from I'm going to start from Miss Ransome Kuti, Auntie Ransome Kuti, Auntie Yemisi. Please, you've said a lot. You are now in a resort where things are not working and it's the top notch of the society, a traditional leader who owns the place, but the facilities are not working. The question is, with all of these issues, the impact that we know, does it appear that the knowledge of these issues have been reflected in our response and our architecture? Like in 2 minutes, what is missing? Why would this knowledge be difficult to be integrated into our response mechanism from your experience? Because you've dealt with political parties, you've dealt with leaders, you have been a leader yourself. What's the missing link in 2 or 3 minutes?
Thank you, Esther. For me, the missing link is the disconnect between the tiers of government, the federal, state, and local. That's number one. The disconnect between the people and the infrastructure, the structures that govern them. People feel helpless. If they have a problem, they don't know where to go and get some redress. They're not part of the deliberations of identifying the policies and strategies and being part of the solution. This is what we are doing in Lagos Island. And I hope other people will also, pay attention to what's happening there and see whether it will assist in tackling some of these challenges we're talking about. Because at that level, we have brought state government. We have held the state government in one hand. We have held the local government in the other hand. We have brought the youths in and given them the leadership of the program. There's absolute transparency. And as you see the program blooming and the youths suddenly understanding that, oh, there is a space for them. They can meet with the local government chairman. They can meet with the minister of this and that. We, on the platform we have developed for them, we give them the numbers, we give them the names, we give them the programs that government has, because government has, for instance, in Lagos State, government has a lot of empowerment programs, but it's like the Shroud of Turin, clouded in mystery. How do you find it? And even if you find it, how do you engage with it? So we are identifying, we're trying to loosen. It's going to be something that each one of us has to engage in. It's going to be different from location to location. It's not going to be solved by bringing all the ideas that we had before. It's about coming on a fresh plate and say, look, this is the challenge. How do we together solve it? The local government, the officers in the various parliaments, and we know the challenge. We know how politics works in Nigeria, for instance. I ran for office, and I know that if you don't have money, forget it. If you don't have the power brokers behind you, forget it. So you can't begin to say, oh, just jump into politics and that will solve it. Yes, some people have to go into politics. Some people have to engage in the dialogue. The strategy that's going to work for each and every one of us has to begin by all of us going back to our homes, thinking things through, being the example that we want to see out there. You cannot be lambasting the political leaders when you are beating your wife. You cannot be lambasting, the structures when in your own home you are not, operating a system that is transparent, that is respectful, that also ensure that is inclusion. You cannot be talking down to your children when really you're saying, oh, you are the leaders of tomorrow, but go and sit down and shut up. That's not going to work. We all have to begin to rethink how we engage with ourselves, how we begin to embolden and strengthen the ethical and value systems that has been lost, because we had it when I was growing up. We have to bring all of that back. Like I said, it's multifaceted, and every one of us has to begin to think through how it's going to work in your own locality. There's no one size fits all. Thank you.
Thank you so, so much. I think you've actually nailed a few things that we need to do. And that's what I think this session is all about, is that, yeah, there's some areas that from where we sit or where we stand, we can do something. And I've actually heard some of what you said is looking at models that will work at the grassroots level, because if we get it right at that grassroots level and we get engagement there and we get ownership, then we can begin to see little changes in some communities that other people might want to tie into. Because we see replication in Nigeria. When good things work, people replicate it. And so I would be keen on hearing that model, that engagement, and that community that you're working with. And let's see, maybe we can have things that other people can adopt. And so thank you very much. I am going to also be throwing out the issue of women's natural peace negotiation and peace conflict resolution skills. Auntie Iyom, women are natural peace brokers. They do it at the family level. They do it within the marriage. They do it within the community when they are permitted. How can we draw more on that? Have we seen a lot of that? To what degree have women been involved in shaping the peace architecture in Nigeria? And what should we be doing differently? Because I know that we said women would help reduce criminality, but we're talking about our peace architecture. Auntie Iyom, what can you tell us about women's natural peace negotiation and conflict resolution skills, and how we make that more visible and utilize that better in our response to insurgency? You have the floor, Auntie Iyom, for like 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, women have all that skill naturally, but the system in which the women live in has not given them the permission, the scope, to do it, to practice what they know naturally. You start with looking at federal. You look at all the security chiefs. There is not one woman among them. You look at the state governors. There is not one woman that's a state governor, and they are the chief security officers in their states. You look at the local government level. There is no one woman that is the local government chairman, and they are the chief security officers at the local government. You look at the traditional institution. There is no one woman that is a traditional ruler. So how can women, and women are asking, they are demanding to be included. They are demanding to be, to be used, so, to be employed in this activities that the men pretend that they are doing. But they are not giving the leeway, they are not giving they are not there. I told you when I started that I'm in the village, and, I'm in the village, and there's going to be a village meeting to discuss what is happening. But I can't be there because I'm a woman. No woman is allowed to be there. That is how our societies are constructed at the local government, at the grassroots level. So, and you find that women have their own meetings, but it's like women are talking to women and to themselves. So they can't do anything. They don't have the power. They don't have the authority, and nobody is listening to them. It has come to the stage where women are not even talking again. They're not even, it's as if there are no women in Nigeria. Sometimes I call women and, together and said, aren't you bothered about what is happening? Aren't you bothered about the insecurity? And they said to me, what can we do? Who is listening to us? We don't have the power, we don't have the authority. And we cannot even be in the rooms where security issues are being discussed. So we cannot even, offer our advice. So what should be done? Women should be involved as advisors, as activists, because they are even the ones who are living the experiences more than any other person. So if they bring in their own, lived experience to the table, then we can now start finding solutions to some of the problems that are bedeviling us. And before I stop, it's not part of the question, but I saw Prof asking what is the difference between what is empowerment. Prof, in politics, when we say empowerment, we mean dash us small money. But I always tell them that that is not empowerment. Empowerment is giving you knowledge. Empowerment is educating you so that you know what your rights are, you know what you can demand. Empowerment is showing you the way, how to make money, how to, improve your business. That is what I call empowerment, not palliatives, not little handouts that they share during political parties. Our problem is that because we have not paid attention to selection of our leaders, we are saddled with people who are very selfish, people who are very corrupt, and there's a lot of impunity. Nobody is asking anybody anything, no accountability. So we just stay in the mess forever.
Thank you very, very much, Auntie Iyom. I had no doubt that you would hit the nail on the head, and you have. You've told us how the system has obstructed the use of women's skill, where we are failing to draw on women's proven and tested skills. And even at the village level, I can tell you, I am trying to hold a town hall for women to speak. But like you said, it looks like they want women to talk to women, and we must stop that. We must not be women talking to women. Women must speak to the system, speak to the issues, and find entry points where we can change it. And that's why these panels like this will help us to aggregate our thoughts, aggregate our views, and order our priorities, right? Or even synergize them, because there are certain things we need to do concurrently. We cannot wait to do it one after the other. They must go hand in hand. And so thank you very, very much. You've put a lot out, and women are silent. They don't want to talk. They're tired. After 40 years of CEDAW, 26 or 27 years of Beijing, we're tired of talking, but we can't be tired. And that's why I'm happy that we're all speaking today. And so I'm going to direct my next question to Auntie Yemisi, because you spoke extensively to Aisha, Mrs. Oyebode. You talked about the experience of Wusila. You talked about, how cultural issues in the society are actually mirrored in the insurgency that we're witnessing. And so my question to you is, we've seen a lot happen, but has the containment strategy, because we've done a lot. There are IDP camps. There are, they're rebuilding and reconstructing, and they're giving all kinds of starter packs. Now they are rehabilitating and absorbing, insurgents who willingly give up. Has the containment strategy integrated a gender-sensitive response mechanism? If yes, how? Do you know a few examples? And if not, how can we do this? Because you seem to have your feet on the ground, and that to say women have been used as suicide bombers. If they could use women as suicide bombers to the greatest degree that they've done, how can we ensure that women then get to play a part in the response strategy? And so I'm yielding the floor to you, Mrs. Aisha Oyebode. Like in 3 minutes, how can we better engender the containment strategy and the response mechanisms that we have?
So I think that, we talk a lot usually, which is, I think, very important, about macro issues. How do we get into governance? How do we change the situation? And I think what you've also mentioned was the micro level interventions in terms of putting women in IDP camps, giving them what they need. I actually like to deal with the what I call the meso levels, the intermediate one, because I think that maybe that's where our power will come from as women. I talked earlier about the laws. We need to tighten the laws. We need to not only tighten the laws, we need to make sure that the laws apply. What are the issues that are plaguing us the most? Everybody has talked about it. You know, we talk about the fact that there's women lack education, women lack access. But you know that if we sat with our laws and we made sure that our laws not only are well written, but they're also implemented, I think we'll begin to see a difference. So when we were talking, for example, about, you were talking about the containment strategy in the insurgency, and you were talking about the IDP camps, right? And even within those IDP camps, you know that there's still a situation where women are still being subjected to sexual violence, they're still being subjected to rape, they're still being subjected to abuse. So where is the protection? Do you understand? Boko Haram is using women as suicide bombers because they are cheaper than a mechanical bomb. It's easier to strap a bomb on a girl, and it's cheaper than to actually build a mechanical bomb. And they're able to do so in huge numbers. We're talking 300, 400. Do you know that when, after the first set of Chibok girls started coming back, and women were being brought back into communities, they were bringing them back in trailer loads. Who has been made accountable for that? Even within the, so I know that it sounds like I'm throwing up questions, but I'm hoping that in the questions, we can find answers. So for me, perhaps because also I'm a lawyer, I think that for personally speaking, that meso level, those laws, what are we doing about them? What are we doing to make sure that we protect women, whether is, I mean, I saw a question about the Constitution, that we don't buy into there are lots of people who don't buy into the Constitution. Until we do that, can we use the good parts of it? I'm not one for throwing anything out. If it's damaged, take the parts that we don't want, we leave it aside, and we use the parts of it that are good. There's enough in there to protect women. Look at the issue of, what do you call it? We were talking about access to, okay, it was Auntie Josephine that was talking about the difference between empowerment and Dashmi. How is it possible that we have women in Nigeria? In fact, first and foremost, in certain parts of the country, you have 70% illiteracy, and you can be rest assured out of that 70%, more than 70% are women. And they're not even getting, so women are not even getting Western education, they're not getting religious education as well. So you actually, literally, we are condemning huge tracts of our society, do you understand, to penury, lifelong suffering. And you see, this grievance, this frustration and the grievances that we are seeing that are so endemic in these insurgencies, part of it have to do with the, you know, there's a gender dimension to it as well. We fail to understand that if we don't educate women, if we don't empower women, they give birth to both men and women.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. I'm so happy that you've actually zeroed in on the fact that women have become like alternate weapons of war. Rather than being victims, they are now weaponized. They become weapons. They're cheaper than acquiring small arms or buying machine guns or buying, you know, trucks, you know, all of the machines that they need to be able to dominate and to fight, and that women are actually a cheap substitute to acquiring ammunition. And so I think that's a new dimension that we probably need to interrogate a lot more. But at this point, I think there's a question that has been on my mind in terms of, we've seen women's representation and leadership in public and political life. And we're talking about additional representation, and people seem to think that, you know, the cost of including women and now is something that should deter us from having more women, or that where now reverse discrimination is what we're practicing when we make room for more women, although the convention, the CEDAW or the Maputo Protocol doesn't see it that way. I'm going to ask Dr. Amina Salihu, because I know you talked about infrastructure, you talked about, but I want you to speak to the issue that Ene raised, and which is a concern to me, that how do we get better understanding of women's leadership role, and how can this help us to address insurgencies in general, the way we see it manifested within our socio-economic polity within our system. Dr. Amina, would you just, in 3 minutes, I'm throwing that question at you because you've talked many things, but I want you to reflect that back, to link it back to women's leadership, you know. Have we used women enough? Even those who are in leadership, the ministers, we have Iyom here, she's talked about local meetings, women are excluded. Do we sufficiently understand the value of women's leadership? And that's what I'm asking. And how will that help us in this stride or this beat to tackle insurgency in Nigeria? Dr. Salihu.
Thank you, my sister, the moderator. I mean, the answer is a very straightforward, no, we have not. And leadership for women, just like politics for women, begins way before you come to say you're running for office. It starts from the family. The fact that even in a family, anybody who, you know, commits the crime, quote and unquote, of being born female, let me turn up my video again to improve audio, commits the crime of being born female is already assumed to be a second class. She has no voice. Sometimes she will be asked to get married so that her whatever she gets from the husband is used to send her brother to school. So we have already diminished the personhood of girls and women. And that's why earlier I said, changing and expanding the space for women has to be a life cycle issue. We need to pay attention to equity between our boys and our girls. The way we raise our boys should be the same way we're raising our girls. We must raise our boys to be the equals of our girls. Now, we are flipping the argument in the sense that there's a whole lot of focus on raising girls to be self-assured, to be very aware, to be knowledgeable, but we're not raising our boys to respect, you know, women's human rights and to understand. And I'm saying this generically, I'm not saying every family is doing that, but we have to begin to sow women's leadership from the family outwards. And that would have its multiplying effect in terms of how many girls get to go to school, what kind of learning they get when they go to school. Because when they go to school, completing a course of secondary schooling can actually delay fertility. By the time that girl is about to have a child, she'll be about 18 years. And so that gives her a bit more knowledge, a bit more capacity to manage a family than if she hasn't been to school at all. She has better leadership capacity. She has a greater awareness. Right now, where we think about peace building, women are not at the table. Yet, the literature tells us that for any peace building process where we have women at the table, the chances of that peace enduring is 3 times higher than a peace table where women are not there.
Yes.
Right. And yet we're
tested. Yeah.
Exactly, it's proven and tested, my sis. So we need to create more spaces for women's voice to be heard, and we need to redesign it from the structure of the family, the structure of society, and the way we engage the state to ask the question, the simple fundamental question, where are the women? This is a question we always have to ask. Where are the women? Let me pause here, moderator, because I see some questions in the chat I would like to answer, and I need your permission to be able to do that. So I'm trying to save a few seconds to ask you if I may do that or not.
Oh, please go ahead, my sister. We've got, yes, we can accommodate that because that's the next segment anyway. So if you take it on, we're very much in order.
Many thanks indeed, my sister Esther, moderator. Ademola had asked about data. I talked about data earlier, and I think the summary of the question is, why is data important? I mean, data is important in a context where planning informs policy, and that is where we are trying to get to. If you don't know the number of people you're for, if you don't know their lived reality, you don't have your facts, planning is just anecdotal. It will always be at the whims and caprices of people who have power. We need to have indicators that show that data is being captured in a way that can transform lives. I'll give you an example. As a result of insurgency, we have an increased surge of female-headed household heads. Yet, most times when policymakers think about household heads, they imagine that these household heads are men. Yes, there are some men household heads, but there are female household heads. Single parenthood is a reality of our times. If we're not able to capture data that reflects that reality, how do we match social investment in that direction? So data has to be matched to budgeting in a way that the resources we're spending can be monitored and we can see who is benefiting. I can speak more to that, but because of time, I guess this is what I can say.
There's time, but can I take you on that? Because that's come up repeatedly in women's leadership. Because the question that is usually asked globally is, what's the added value of women around the table? And we've been able to prove that with the Rwandan study, that women actually, they diversify economies, they refocus spending priorities, and they make room, for inclusion so that policies speak to the realities of people. And so when you say matching data with planning, do we sufficiently understand, and what can we do differently, that people know that women around the table is actually, we're doing ourselves good, that no, women's absence is actually undermining the economy? I don't think people sufficiently realize that. They're only counting the numbers. But what's the value added and what are we missing? If you can take like a minute to speak to that, because I know that's one of the areas that you work with.
Dear moderator, and let me split economy into two. Let me split the economy, the productive economy, where women are also excluded, as well as the care economy, where women's unpaid labor subsidizes the state. And that is where we have to start from. Oxfam tells us, and this is why data is important, Oxfam tells us that the value of women's care economy, ironing the shed, cooking the food, taking care of the children, fetching the water, subsidizing the state generally, its value is $10 trillion every year. $10 trillion of women's time that is not recognized. And I'll tell you how it's not recognized. The productive economy does not factor that into its structure. When a woman wants to take maternity leave, for example, they do not see the link between a woman taking maternity leave and reproducing human resource for that same organization or for the state. They do not see women taking maternity leave as serving the state. So an awareness of the starting point of the care economy in terms of that fundamental economy as the one upon which the production economy is built is very important. And women are the ones who are subsidizing the state by serving the care economy. If we begin to respect that unpaid labor for women, then we would not have to ask the question twice, why should Nigeria have 4.5% representation of women in its national legislature? It would not even happen. Now, the whole dimension around conflict also, we are in the way in which women are left holding the short end of the stick when peace is short. They are the ones who become the household heads and single parents, and they're the ones in the IDP camps. And if they're not getting these resources, if peace planning is not planning for women and with women, we stand the danger of, if you will, perpetuating a generational poverty, such that you cannot break out of that poverty because it's going to be cyclical. Your mother is who she is, and so her children are who they are because she cannot break her, because nobody sees her in terms of conflict. So, but if we're asking ourselves the question, how is conflict impacting women? What is the analysis? And what kinds of social investments do we have that will center women? Because like you rightly said, moderator, when women get resources, 80% of those resources go back to the family. This is proven analysis. But when men get money, it goes elsewhere. Designer cars and a second wife and all of that. These are our lived reality. And we cannot ignore, all of these social dimensions. We must bring the social into economic planning. I guess that is what I am saying. It is not enough to just jump and say, let's look at the productive economy. Why is there no creche in that workplace? That woman or that father should be able to bring their children to work so that they can be more productive people? Why is it that it's the girl who has to be withdrawn from school so that the boy can go? Why isn't education free and qualitative and relevant and leading to employment at the end of the day? So
thank you
there's so much that we can say on this subject matter, but I think I'll just pause here.
I know, but I know that we've stirred something, and we've actually been able to join a few dots for us to know that when we're talking about insurgency, the impact of insecurity on women, we're talking of a whole range of issues, multidimensional, multi-layered, and that some of the fundamental issues that are ignored actually rebound on the economy and planning and investment. And if we don't make the links in our argument, and we just want women around the table for being there, then it looks like we're not tying all the knots. Maybe that's the way to put it. Thank you very, very much, my sister Amina. I'm now going to turn to Miss Ene. My sister, you were part of the development of the first National Action Plan on Peace and Security in Nigeria in response to UNSCR 1325. And I know you were part of the second NAP. And I know that they're working now, you're part of the peace architecture, there's a peace sector reform group, and they're doing a lot. What's missing, you know? Have we really taken on board, you know, elements that are within our National Action Plan on UNSCR 2025 in our security architecture? What can we do differently as we go into the third National Action Plan? How do we make Nigeria more accountable? Because I believe if we do, like the whole world has said, UNSCR 1325 tells us about being accountable to the needs of women, integrating them so that we can have stable societies and we can have peace and security and human security at large. My sister, in 3 minutes, I know we've spent a lot of time. What's happened with our National Action Plan and how can we revive it? I think that's, how can we make it central to peace architecture in Nigeria?
Okay, is that question for me?
Yes, because...
yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You know, when I think back, I looked at the conference of the governor's wives against violence against women that happened yesterday, the second conference, and coincidentally or divinely arranged, also the second national conference, peace and security. If you look at that, you see that the outcome, if we had sat down before now and look at it, you see, the governor's wives, I don't know why they are doing better than us. Maybe it took because they have political background and a number of them, especially the person leading them, has development background. Let us take our minds back to the period that Dr. Okonjo-Iweala and Nenadi Usman, Senator Nenadi Usman were ministers and minister of state in finance. Do you remember what happened? There was a 10-year budget because the governors were making a lot of trouble. So their response to that was that, okay, what we are going to do now, let us play up statistics and let us see how the people will respond. I recall going to the immediate past governor of Gombe State, when he was the, what was his position? Accountant General. I went to his office and I requested for the copy of that 10-year budget. What the two sisters wanted to show Nigerians in the 774 local government areas was that, look at the much money your leaders get, the federal level, the state level, and the local government level. Look at the statistics and see if this has connection. If it has, you had been able to influence your livelihood. Has it impacted on your peace and security? Has it impacted on family enjoyment? Has it impacted on your health? Has it impacted on your education? So when they did that, I remember it was heavy. I think a set of that book was, I think like close to 20 kg. I chartered the vehicle and I took 20 copies home. 20 sets, not copies. Huge. If you multiply the kg I've told you now, you can imagine. I took it to the community. The first person I gave was a reverend father who is a retired army captain. He was an army chaplain here in Abuja. He's very critical. He thinks well and he has platform and he speaks. I took another one to the Catholic bishop. You know the Catholic speaker. I'm not a Catholic, but they have that voice. I took other ones to my traditional rulers and gave it to some of the opinion leaders around the village. And I sat with them. I explained to them. I said, you see, there is relationship between this document and the situation you are suffering now. The petty prostitution that is happening, they're taking advantage of your daughters, your wives by politicians, the political class. And when I did all that, I realized that it was able to generate an immediate response, and all of them were willing to hold all the stakeholders accountable, all the political leaders accountable. This is what I also like us to do with the peace and security. It's what I've been proposing, because as somebody interested in behavioral change communication, I'm interested in how their attitude can change, either voluntarily or by pressure that we put on. If we look at all this security architecture in Nigeria, both formal and informal, and we do an analysis and we present to them and we share, they will look at the statistics, because we are speaking from knowledge-based perspective. We are not just speaking sentiment. Then when we demand for positions, like the 111 seats, it will make greater sense. But if we just say, oh, they are not doing us well, and we are not bringing out the statistics like our sister Amina spoke about, thank God that we just released a report of the first annual VAP, the National VAP report. Westminster Foundation for Democracy had released one that focused on 12 states earlier in the year. So this report is a little bit more expansive than the one. So those ones who are tools for us to use for advocacy. So for me and sisters, the encouragement has been that all of us within the spaces we have, not everybody has the opportunity to speak and liberty to speak like Dr. Amina, Sister Aisha, and all of us are speaking. And the kind of messages Professor Okome is dropping on the chat box. But there are those within their spaces. I know a general who is still there, a sister, who will go to different individuals and say, you can't do this to our young sister. This is like a daughter to you. So within the spaces of influence, we can make a better use of the third national action plan. The Minister of Women Affairs spoke expansively about it. So it will make better meaning if we use statistics and if we communicate well, not like we are threatening, because many of them are tough-skinned. So we can address that strange structure.
Madam Moderator, can we answer audience questions?
Yes, I think we need to turn to the audience. Yes, that I've said thank you. I think some of the questions coming from the audience are things that we would like to address now. My screen, I'm having difficulty rolling the questions by. So can I?
I can read.
Get help
I can
with reading some of it, because it's jumping off my phone. I'm working
gladly.
Yes.
Okay, so Ademola Adeshola said, I thank all the panelists for their enriching perspectives on the matter of insurgency. My question is for Mrs. Aisha Muhammed-Oyebode. Does rethinking the idea of the Nigerian state itself hold some viable solutions to the challenges of insurgency and incessant conflicts in Nigeria? The next question is from Maxine Ofieli. She said, Nigeria's educational curriculum was originally set up under British rule. Can you discuss how it has evolved and continues to evolve so that we bring these issues and ways to address them into our elementary and secondary school classrooms to raise awareness about these issues and what it means to be a responsible member of society? I think that's about civic education.
Citizenship, yeah.
Yes. And then Ademola Adeshola is asking another question. Thank you, Dr. Amina Salihu. You gave us so much to think about. I assume the little time you have didn't allow you to buttress some of the points you raised. I would like you to speak a little more to your first point on strengthening advocacy efforts based on data and evidence. I think she answered that, right?
She did. She spoke to that.
Yes. And so maybe we should do that, and then, let the speakers also have their final word. And if I run, it's not because I don't respect people, it's because my job is at stake.
Professor, I think some of the questions have been spoken to, because does rethinking the Nigerian state hold viable solutions? I think we've actually heard that we need to restructure our system because there's a disconnect at the different tiers of government. I don't know that has not been spoken to.
No.
But there's a question.
Okay, so listen, madam, I'm going to argue with you, because you see, this restructuring business, just like empowerment, it vexes me, because everybody that talks about restructuring thinks that people know exactly what they're talking about. And if you really deconstruct it, we're not all talking about the same thing. So if people are going to use those kind of words, I think they're going to have to be specific. What exactly are you meaning by this restructuring? And the whole, let's make all the systems, the levels work together, is also not specific enough in terms of what needs to be. I think people are eager to hear from our experts here, nuts and bolts of what needs to happen, not buzzwords.
Well, in the time that we have on a seminar like this, I would say maybe in 20 seconds, because the issues we're trying to talk about, you cannot address them in 20 seconds or in 3 minutes, because like you said, we're talking about differential understanding, meaning, interpretation, views, and perspectives. And so the limited time that we have, I think my statement is, the point has been made that we need to rethink. That has been established. The how is not what I think we can take on board now, unless you're prepared to extend us for maybe another 2 hours, and then we begin to talk about that. So what I would suggest is that those issues that have not been addressed, in particular, the Nigerian educational curriculum that has become moribund, because my understanding is it was set, it's something we've been trying to rework, our value systems have changed. Perhaps we can speak to that, because that has not come up sufficiently in the conversation that we've had, and it's a question that came up. So, and I would say, throw it open. Which of the panelists want to speak? Because we do not have the time to listen to everybody. How has the educational system, our educational system, fared in managing our value system? And what do we need to do so that people can actually engage with the system? We're saying people are not engaging, they're not going into politics. All of this derives from our curriculum. What can we do, and what should be our priorities? Auntie Yemisi, because I think you spoke about education, and you talked about, yes, you spoke and you said the examples that there's this connect between the tiers. Has this got anything to do with our educational system in your work in the community that you're dealing with? Because we're talking now of our curriculums not being relevant to the realities of today. People are not getting the values and the kind of education that is fit for purpose in the 21st century. What have you seen, and how should we use this in our effort or our bid to curb insurgency?
Well, the short answer, thank you for throwing me that loaded question. The short answer is the educational system I'm trying to think of a kind word, but it is not fit for purpose. And we need to do a lot of overhauling of the entire curricula to actually address the challenges that the young people will face, not just now, but in future, because other countries are steaming ahead, equipping their citizens, their young people, from creche, from the womb to adulthood, with the capacity, the skills that is required to give them a foothold in the development, economic and social development of the nation. But while I have you here, there's a very important point that Amina made about laws, that we keep laws, there are laws there, we make laws, there's various laws that we have that nobody's keeping, partly because the citizens themselves are not engaged in how that law is made. So we need to do a bit more of that to make sure it's an inclusive process in the development of our legal frameworks. And my daughter, who did her PhD at a university in the UK, actually did a thesis on this and did a lot of research. Unless people feel that the law is something that they agree with, they're going to disobey it, and you don't have the necessary infrastructure to compel them to obey. So all of
200 million citizens, yeah.
Yes, and then a very important point I think we've missed is the effect of climate change on the whole insurgency issue. I think it was Amina who mentioned the Sahel, now, or Lake Chad. The farmers that used to graze around that area, they've lost, the water has dried up, and that's why they migrate, and then poverty is part of the effects of that. I think, again, a lot of time needs to be devoted into actually looking at and teasing that out and seeing where the specifics are. But I thought I should mention it. Now, the private sector is one of the areas, I mean, a lot of civil society organizations, we talk to each other, we must engage the private sector as well to make sure that they are part of that discussion and, make the CSR. There's one thing we have developed in the program I was telling you about earlier on, which is advocating around what we call the 2-kilometer rule, that businesses within 2 kilometers of their operations will hire people, will buy goods and services from within 2 kilometers. And we're working at this, trying to put the legal framework, tax exemptions, and all kinds of frameworks around it so it works for the people. So the final word is women. We bring the men and women into the world. We have the capacity to solve this problem, and we should not despair, because the history of the world, in Africa, we're the last sort of grappling with this whole development issue. Europe had the worst time than we have ever had in their development, in the history of their development. So we should not despair, we should be invigorated, knowing that we have the capacity. And when we're talking about women in politics or various leadership positions, we don't want just women. We want women who have the capacity, who have the quality, and who can actually deliver on the various multifarious challenges that we're all facing. I want to thank
you
all for having us here.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'm sure you were able to tie the knots there and make the links in how our curriculum links to the value system, equipping the youth, and you talked about grooming people for adults. So I think an area which we also talk about is technology and the digital economy, is that artificial intelligence is really, robotics are galloping. How equipped are our people, and how are we even integrating this in our response architecture? And so I think we've had a very, very good session. Prof, I'm sure when you play back, we have a basket of issues, recommendations that we can harvest. And I think we should not despair. That's one of the things that I think we should go away with from this, is that we should not despair. All regions of the world are grappling with insecurity, with banditry, with insurgency, but that in Africa, all hope is not lost. And that if we get the right women on the table, we know the value added now, and we can speak to both the formal economy, the productive economy, and the care economy. And women around the table make a world of difference. I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank the organizers, all of the participants that put in so many useful questions. I would really like to thank you. And I hope that we're going away from this very, very brilliant and articulate, insightful webinar to be able to equip ourselves, re-engage, re-strategize, join the dots, and make a difference. Thank you very much. And I'll hand over back to the organizers and to commend you for a very, very good panel. And the panelists were all excellent. Thank you very much.
Can I just quickly jump in and say thank you for our excellent moderator. You did an amazing job. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. And I'm also going to throw this one bit because some of the things I heard, I'm hoping that we will have a town hall on the 14th of this December. I think I will send invitations for some of you to join virtually. It is getting women's voices in how we change the legislative agenda reforms to integrate women's issues, their economic issues into the reform so that AFTA can deliver to women, because the way it's going, women may not benefit from AFTA as well as men. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of the day, wherever you are in the world. And it's been wonderful being with you. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator.
Thank you, Esther.
Thank you,
Professor Okome.
Thank you so very much.
Great to have seen all of you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I will hand you over to Dr. Obi and Professor Sahid and Dr. Chika, because I am out of here. I'm late for a very important work-related meeting. So
we are done. Thank you. We had you all the time, Prof. So you can run. We have everybody out. We have our notes app. I'm so happy. And I'm happy to reconnect with a lot of sisters. And I'm looking forward to us keeping engaged so that we can make the change that we desire. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
No, I think that
thank you. Organizers. I'm clapping. I think I need to put on my...
At the beginning. Okay. I think since Chika did not speak at the beginning, myself and Said spoke. I think Chika, you should have the last word. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you to this excellent panel and all your insight concerning insurgencies. I am Chika Okoye. My research is also on the political economy of market women. That was what I did my research on. And I am the vice president of the Nigerian Studies Association. So we are part of the organizing group, but we really appreciate your contributions here. And we hope that we'll continue to dialogue. This is just one in a series. So I'm sure we'll be contacting you very soon to come up with some more stuff, to some more gems. And we're also thinking of writing a book based on these seminars. So get your papers together. We might be contacting you for that too. But thank you so much. And I wish you a great evening. Have a lovely weekend and join us tomorrow. We start again at 9 our time, which is 3 p.m. Nigerian time. And we have 2 more panels tomorrow. So we look forward to seeing all of you, and come with your questions, come with your contributions. So thank you so much for
thank you so
agreeing
much.
to participate.
Bravo. Bravo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My big
thank
sister.
You very much.
Brothers,
thank you. Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Auntie Iyom, I'm going to be calling you right away. Now that I know you have access right now.
Aja, I still run away.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Auntie Iyom. Thank you very much, Dr. Okoye. I'll be in touch with you. I'll be contacting you.
Okay.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Sahid. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent presentation.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.